Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the In the 11 podcast. I am your host, Brendan Griffiths, and this is the show where we bring on those from the world of football to show you what it takes to be in the 11 at the highest possible level. Now, speaking of that highest possible level, you constantly hear about American players who are making the jump over to Europe, right, to chase professional football contracts and to try and get to the highest level over in European soil. And while amazing, not quite as rare as it maybe used to be a decade ago or prior to that. But what is still pretty rare is seeing American coaches do that same jump. You see Jesse Marsh start to do it a little bit. Some other guys have done it, but that list is pretty few and far between, very selective company. We actually have, as our guest this week, someone who has made that jump, has made that leap, and forged a career out in Europe as a professional football coach, mostly applying his trade in Finland, had a stint in Slovakia and Papua New Guinea and all over the world, and I don't want to give too much away here at the top, but Mike Keeney joins us this week in the 11, so I can't wait to kick it over to our conversation. Before I do that, if you could do me a favor, please, and if you like the episodes, you like the content that we're putting out, whatever platform you're listening on, if you could leave a rating and review of the show, it helps tremendously for the show to grow. If you could tell a friend, share the podcast on your socials, tell a friend about the show if you think it would be a good fit for them. It also helps the show just be spread a little bit more, and it continues to allow us to be able to provide these stories to all of you out there. So, without further ado, here is Mike. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we welcome Mike Keeney to the In the 11 podcast today. And first of all, Mike, thank you so much for joining us. And also, I mentioned to you that I came across your story via an article that was published, a couple weeks ago on ESPN. And so congratulations on that. And I have to ask, what is it like to kind of see a story written about yourself and, other American coaches trying to do something similar to you, in a major publication like ESPN, arguably the biggest one maybe in the world, but definitely in the United States?
Well, first, Brendan, thank you so much for having me on the podcast, man. I really appreciate it. And it's an honor to be able to voice some of the things that I've done and experienced as a coach abroad. And, it's as far, being on ESPN, it's one of those things that, as I said, 15 years ago, if you would have asked me about that, I would have never believed it, and so it's really, it's really cool. I'm still a fan of the game, even though I work in it, but every once in a while you kind of step back and go, yeah, man, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. That was kind of where my question was leading to, I've done some coaching and I'm in coaching kind of right now. And I think coaching has a way of, you always look forward to, what your coaching career could be, but also kind of when you're in your little bubble, so to speak, in the beginning of your career, it's hard to ever foresee yourself being written up with the likes of Bob Bradley, Greg Berhalter, Jesse Marsh, and you're coaching in Europe, right? So if we kind of take it back a little bit, what was it always kind of a mindset that you had of I want to get over there, or when you were first starting coaching, was it just I just want to get around the game?
Well, it's kind of a long story, but it's fact of the matter. I was really fortunate when I was still playing. I was doing a lot of camps and stuff. I worked with Tony DeChico's goalkeeping school, Soccer Plus, and I also worked with Post to Post. And so I was really fortunate enough early on to be around some really good, experienced coaches, and that kind of helped me out to say, hey, this is what I'm interested in doing. And by age 21, I actually had 3 knee surgeries, and it pretty much went from the dream of playing disappeared really quick. And I knew I always wanted to be involved in the game. And my first choice, of course, was to play. But when that kind of, disappeared, it was like, okay, what next? And I already had some experience coaching. I already done some of the coaching licensing while I was still, at a young age. And then once I, finished playing, I went directly in, and I was fortunate enough to get a job working with the local club, and then also doing stuff with the college. And from there, it just kind of progressed. I got involved doing the Olympic development program here in the States. I moved from one college to another, and I went from to University of Louisville to University of Kentucky. During this time, I was quite active doing the licensing, just trying to become I guess you would say master of your craft is the term, I guess.
Yes.
So the reality is I really threw everything I had into that. From there, I went down and I took over as a director of coaching at a club called Hoover Soccer Club in Birmingham, Alabama, or actually technically Hoover, Alabama, which is a suburb of Birmingham. And I also worked at Alabama Birmingham, like UAB, with the men's program there. And it was really good. At this time, I was fortunate enough to have some links abroad. I was going to Brazil. I was going to England. I was doing a lot of stuff, trying to see training, trying to learn, trying to get better. It's when you do the coaching schools back then with US Soccer, it was, like a 10, 12-day process. And then that was it. You jump in, you do the course, and then it was pass or fail. See you later. So it was one of those things I was always looking to kind of get better. And so one of the things I would do is I'd take trips abroad, and I'd go to Arsenal for a week, go to, Man United, Everton. Yeah, I was in Brazil for a bit, and I really had a great opportunity to see some other trainings. And at this time, I was able to make a connection with Glasgow Celtic. And we were really trying to do a project here in the States with them. And I went back and forth a few times. We brought some of their coaches over. The idea was to bring some of the American players over there, some of the American coaches. The idea was to exchange ideas. And this was, going on for a little bit. And I was over there one time, and I was really like, I kind of said, hey, this is where I want to be. This is what I want to do. I saw how the academy was working. I'd been to a few of the matches, and, it's, the stadium is packed, the songs, and you're just like, hey, this is it. And I was very fortunate. The person running the academy at the time was Tommy Burns, and he's a Celtic legend, and he was really good to me. And another person named Graham Matthew at the time was in charge of the international program, and had a really good relationship with them. And I was telling them, I'm really interested in working in Europe. And they, Tommy gave me some great advice. He's like, hey, you do a great job coaching, you do a really good job, but you don't have any licensing. You don't have any UEFA licensing. And if you look around here, there was, a guy over here played 150 matches for in the Premier League. This guy played X amount. He's a legend. Said, I can't hire somebody like you because nobody knows who you are and you don't have the credentials. He said, do you have any other options? And I was quite fortunate because at University of Kentucky, we had brought over several Finnish players and had a real good contact over there. One of the former players, his name is Ilkka Janti. He actually was my assistant running the club in Alabama. So we had talked about it previously, and he had moved back to Finland, and he said, hey, yeah, come on over. There was another guy, his name is Mika Lundstrom, who had a contact with him, and these guys tried to help me when I got over there. And I pretty much packed the bags, head over there, took what money I had out of the bank, took it with me and packed up pretty much 2 bags. I bought a one-way ticket, to be real honest with you, and kind of said, hey, I got to make this work. And it was tough. I left a really good paying job in America. I had done the college thing for 10 years. I'd been running youth clubs for that same length of time. One of the things that was kind of significant to me is my father actually had a massive heart attack, and he was there, recovering and doing the stuff. And, kind of said, I had a good talk with him, and he's like, hey, if you want to go do this stuff. And so it just, everything kind of came together at one moment. It was like, all right, I'm going to do it. And just made that decision when he was healthy, and these other opportunities came up. I said, all right, let's go. I got over to Finland, and it's kind of funny. One of the clubs that I'd been talking to, they'd already gotten my CV, got my background. They said, okay, yeah, excellent. When you arrive, let us know. We'll meet and sort out a contract. And this is the truth. I arrived, or before I left, I sent the person at the club, hey, I'll be arriving this time. Here's my thing. I'll get in Wednesday night, but how about we meet on Thursday? Okay, perfect. Well, I traveled, I got there, we arrived Wednesday, got there Thursday, sent a message, said, oh, hey, we didn't know you were coming. So we offered a job to the guy that was coaching it last year. What? So I had packed all my bags, did all that stuff and came over. And it was like, wow, all right, what's happening here? And at that moment, I was fortunate enough because Ilka had a good relationship at the club called FC Viking it in Helsinki. It's in East Helsinki. And he was still playing at the time. And they needed somebody to do what was their A juniors, which is like the U20 league. Mm-hmm. And they said, hey, here's an opportunity for you. I went there. I met with the director of coaching. His name is Pekka Klaver. He said, yeah, here we go. And so, they gave me a run. I did a little training. I said, perfect. Here's a contract for you. You're going to work with the U20s. All right, fantastic. They were in the second tier. There's a national league, and then there's the first division, and good group of players. I worked with them for a few weeks, and then they said, hey, we're getting really good feedback from you. Would you be interested in doing the B juniors too, which is the U17s? So I went, yeah, fair enough. This is great. And things started going really well. And a little bit later, one of the other clubs, HJK Helsinki, one of the coaches there, his name is Gary Williams, he was there at the time. He was coaching the women's team and said, hey, would you mind coming helping me a little bit? I said, yeah, sure. Why not? So I did that for a little bit. And then at Viking it, they come back and said, hey, the first team would like you to come do some individual work with some of the players and do some extra training with them. Great. And it kind of went from having nothing to within 3 months, I was working with like 4 or 5 different teams. I was doing, it was kind of piecemeal. It was like bits and pieces to make enough money to survive. And the club was very helpful. They were able to do stuff that allowed me to get the visa, the working documents. So I met the financial requirements. I also had the coaching education background, which then allowed me to get settled there. And I say this, and I say it joking around, but it reignited my passion for the game. I'd been doing so much work as like the director of coaching, executive director.
Yep.
You were dealing with sponsorship. You're dealing with parents. You're dealing with players. You were doing so few coaching. You were dealing all the administration and all the other stuff. And it was a good job. Like I really enjoyed it. But it was also a taxing job because for, 4 years running a club, you never had more than 2 or 3 days off because there was always a problem. And I'm sure a lot of people that can relate to running clubs is people aren't calling to say, hey, you're doing a great job.
Yeah.
They're calling to say, hey, this is wrong. That's good. Yep. My kid didn't get to take the free kicks, like whatever it is,
Yep.
So when I went over there, those first 6 months, I joke around, and maybe even longer, that first year, it was like a honeymoon. Because I was training lots of teams. I was in a new city. I didn't have a car. I had to get around using the metro or
public transit.
The tram. It was fantastic. Like it was one of those experiences that I look back now and think, I wouldn't mind doing that again. But then I think about it and I go, that was a lot of work.
Yeah.
As I joked around in the article with the ESPN, but I said, at that time, if there was 2 kids kicking a can in the car park, I would go over there and try to give them better technique. I try to teach them. My whole goal that first year was to show everybody what I could do. Just try to make a good impression on people in a way that it could open up some other doors. And it, for me, it was quite fortunate because at Viking it, I went from the A juniors, we got them promoted to what's called the ASM, which is the National League. So it was the first time ever in the club's history that they had a team go up. And so it was fantastic. The B juniors, we missed out. We played the promotion relegation match with the team that was coming down and we didn't go up. So, but both of the teams I coached were at a chance of both getting promoted, which was, really good for the club at the time. And the first team coach I was working with, his name is Tony Korkekonis. His nickname is Toke. Toke said, hey, are you interested in joining the first team staff full time next year? So yeah, that's great. And it's a kind of weird way. One of the other coaches I was working with, his name is Yanni Hankavara. His nickname is Hansu. Well, he was on staff. It was Toke, Hansu, and myself. So we were working together. To come around to that, years later, Hansu and I worked together at Coops. So it's kind of like that first the first 2-3 years there at Viking it were massive for me
Set you
because
up for the career that followed. Yeah,
correct.
yeah. I want to take just a step back there because
Sure.
there's so much there that I definitely want to dive into and give the kind of the people more context here. But it sounds like kind of one of those first maybe roadblocks, or imagine you've had some conversations like this along your career, right? Where you go over to Celtic and you have that conversation of, hey, we love what you bring to the game, but you don't have the licensing yet, or you don't have that playing career to kind of back yourself up, right? Like, something I always talk about with fellow coaches. It's like Steven Gerrard, right? He walks into that job because he has that playing career to fall back on, or not to fall back on, but as part of his CV that springboards him into that next role, right? And I have to imagine for you, I know we kind of glanced over it a little bit, but that transition of you wanted to be a professional player to then quickly like that it's taken away from you, and then you're transitioning into coaching, that's got to be a really difficult thing for you, not only just emotionally, changing what you want to do with your life, but then also it kind of put a bit of an inhibitor on what you were really able to achieve early on in your coaching career.
I'd say yes and no. I mean, the best way I can put it, I was an okay player. I wasn't a great player, and where, I had good ability, I also didn't have all the habits that were needed to be successful as a player. At the time, did I know that? No, not at all. But looking back at it and kind of going, hey, what I could have done, for example, with the injuries, instead of taking the time and doing the rehab right after, the operations, I was so quick to get back in and playing that I didn't give myself enough time to heal. I was young and I say a petulant child might be the right way. I wanted to get back and play. I need to do this. I need that. Whereas maybe if I would have taken a little extra time to get healthy, I could have had maybe a better opportunity at success on the field as a player. But in hindsight, everything was a hindsight. Everything's 2020. So for me, I learned from that, and so like now as a coach, I try to help people not make the same mistake I made. So that's also something that I look at, and I'm kind of grateful that I can help some of these guys avoid making the mistake that I made. In regards to transitioning into coaching, I think I love the camaraderie of being around the team as a player. And this was a way to step into that as a coach, but you still have that feeling. You still have that relationship, being in the changing room after the match, after you win, or, that sort of stuff is what I missed. And I was afraid it would be taken away from me. But when I got into coaching, I found out, hey, you can continue this. You can still add to that part of, your life. And for me, I was really fortunate. And when I started getting that, especially in the college level, I really threw myself into trying to become the best coach I possibly could, reading biographies, trying to learn about the game, speaking with other coaches. I'm a big fan of, collaboration. If you're running training, I want to come watch, see what you do. And afterwards, hey, tell me about this exercise. Tell me about that. Did you ever think about this? And I was really fortunate when I worked at University of Kentucky. Well, back up, even University of Louisville, I had a really good work with good coaching staff. At University of Kentucky, I worked with the coach called Ian Collins. He did a fantastic job. He's one of the guys that's been really good to me over the years. And what I liked about that is, if we were in the coach's room and said, okay, Mike, put your starting 11 on the field. I'd put it on. The other assistant would put it on, and then he would go up and put his on, and then we would debate who was going to play. Why did you select him? Why didn't you do this? And for me, it was really good because I learned about my trade. If I'm selecting this player, what are the grounds? Have you thought about this? What about their player? And it was not be trying to poke holes in what you do, but you had to justify the reason for the selection. Mm-hmm. And this went all the time. And I learned a lot there. When I went to Alabama and worked at UAB with Coach Mike Getman, he was really good. And the fact that, he showed me a lot about man management and how to, work with players. And so I kind of really was fortunate between that University of Louisville with Tony Colavecchia, with Ian at Kentucky, and with Coach Getman at UAB. I had a really good education, and to start it all off, when I was at a school called Bellarmine, Joe McCauley is the guy who gave me my first opportunity there. So I had 4 experienced coaches that were really helping me. And that was one of the things that I was really, really thankful for along the way, is I got to work with different coaches with different styles, and was able to kind of pick what I thought was best from each, and also could exclude what I thought didn't work, and that helped me build who I am, my personality as a coach. And so I was able to kind of step into that role and say, hey, this is who you are as a coach. This is how you want to operate. And it replaced that feeling of being as a player. The first few years when I wasn't playing, I still had the mindset of a player. I want to jump in and do this, or I want to do that. And now I don't think of it that way. I think about, it's not about me, it's about them. What can I do to help the players out to make them better? And I was really fortunate that that time frame was a really, really good, as I say, I learned my craft. I learned my trade during that time. And I'm really, really, fortunate for that.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a really important point there. I think, in the world of football, a lot of it is based on, what your CV says, right? Your CV as a player gets you in the door in certain opportunities, and then the same thing with coaching. And I think coaching, something I've experienced whenever I come on board a new staff or something like that, there's a little bit of time in the beginning where the players are kind of trying to feel you out, kind of trying to see, do you really know what you're talking about? Do you understand the game, or do you have our best interests at heart? And so there takes a little bit of an adjustment period, and I imagine you've kind of experienced similar things, but I think coaches that truly treat it as a craft and truly put the work in it, and the best word that comes to mind for me is they're grafters, right? They want to go and watch as many sessions as possible and just become a sponge and absorb as much information as they can about the game. Those are the ones that really show their value to those players and show that they can bring those players to the next level. Did you experience that kind of, once you became maybe a little bit obsessed with the game, that was then translated over to those players were able to recognize it when you were working with them?
Yeah, well, I think a player very quickly can see, do you care about them, or do you have their best interests at heart, and do you know what the hell you're talking about?
Yeah.
And that's the big thing. And this goes back to what I was saying a little while ago. I have to be who I am, right? When you're running training, you have to be yourself. You can't, it makes no sense for me to mimic what Klopp is doing or what Guardiola is doing. You could pick something away, but you have to be who you are with your personality. And that was one of the things early on that I was fortunate enough, as I worked with coaches who encouraged me to do that, and on the college staff, I was a little bit younger than they were. So I was a little bit closer in age to some of the players. So it always allowed me to have a good relationship with the players. They could come and speak to me about, how they felt about training or how they felt about something else, where we were able to have a little bit more of that, relationship than sometimes when you're the head coach. And that's something that, having done this a while now, you have to understand being a head coach and assistant coach of it, you have different roles. You have, there's not say different respect factor. I don't mean it that way, but I think it's much easier to come talk to the assistant sometimes to get the feedback. Hey, what do you think if I talk to the head coach about this? The players can test the waters. And if the players see that you're genuine and you truly have interest in them, I think that's the biggest part. In my experience, while tactics and training are a big part, man management, but the relationships are the biggest part. If you have good relationship with players, then it makes your job much easier. You have to know what you're doing on the field. That's a given. But the reality of it is, if you got the dressing room to buy into what you're doing, you're 90% of the way there.
Yeah.
And that was, a big part. And I think you can only really do that by being who you truly are.
And how does a coach find, maybe a young coach, how do they find that voice, right? Because I'm sure they probably take a little bit of ideas from their mentors or who they look up to in the game. And I think it can sometimes be difficult for a young coach to really figure out what's my philosophy? How do I want to communicate with my players? What advice could you maybe give, or, even personal experience in really finding what your voice was as a coach?
I'd say repetition. Go out and do as much training as you can. Practice what works, what doesn't work. How do you interact with players? How do you interact with other coaches? And I think you have to do it in real life. you know
Mm-hmm.
Watching videos is great, reading books is great, it gives you some food for thought, but carrying it out on the field is the most important part. When you're on the pitch with the players, it has to be genuine. This is one of the things I tell people: go watch training, because you're going to get more out of listening to that coach when they're giving instructions, or how they talk to players, or what they're actually looking for, versus just reading it out of a magazine.
Yeah.
Or nowadays, I think it's popular on Twitter and YouTube. You see a lot of people that edit videos, or put graphics up there, and this is what they're doing. Well, it's listen to the sound, hear what the coaching points are, take it on. There's a lot of people out there that have fantastic PowerPoints, but can't go on the pitch and coach, to save their life.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's the big thing: is go on the pitch, practice, run the training sessions, get confident in yourself, so that when you step in front of a group of players, it's second nature to you. You don't have to think about it. You don't have to put on a show. This is what I want. These are my objectives. This is the exercise, how we're going to do it. Boom, here we go. These are my key points. And it. Like early on, I'll be quite honest, I used to carry like a piece of paper in my pocket, that had the exercises that may have a couple key points.
Mm-hmm.
And, it was to help guide myself. As I've done it more and more, I mean, I think this is my 25th or 26th year of being a full-time coach. So I don't always use the piece of paper in my pocket anymore. I've
Yeah.
done it a few times. So I feel a lot more secure in my knowledge
Mm-hmm.
of what I'm looking for, and the ability to recognize it, and the ability to get it out of players, than early on, because I knew what something was wrong. Like, you watch something and it breaks down, you say, oh, it's not working because Jim's losing the ball. Well, why is Jim losing the ball? Well, now I could say, well, if you look at his body shape, he's receiving with the wrong foot. He's not scanning. You can have a laundry list of things that need to happen in order for him to be successful. That's just him. But where's the ball coming from? Where's the pressure coming from? Then you start to look at the checklist as it goes down, and you can see what factors cause him to lose the ball. So again, early on, I had the vision of a player. Now I think I have a vision of a coach, a trainer. So to me, that's something that you only get with practice.
In the same way that you evolved as a coach and evolved your coaching style, and we've talked about this a little bit so far in the episode of how you've advanced from being very involved in the youth game and very involved in the youth game in the United States, and then also kind of more in the administrative side of it, to also college coaching as well. How does a coach's career kind of grow and evolve, or your goals grow and evolve? Because I think early on, coaches, there's some who get involved in the youth game and they're like, this isn't quite for me, but they love the college game, and vice versa. And then also for you, then expanding into Europe offered all this new realm of possibility that maybe isn't offered in the same format in the United States. So how did you kind of feel like, early on, were you like, I want to be a head college coach at a Division I program or something like that? And then did your goals sort of evolve?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. Yeah. I mean, for me, the entry point was youth soccer, but I was very fortunate enough to have a contact with the college that got me in. You know, all during my playing days, I was doing the camps. So
Yep.
I was able to experience that. And then once I started getting into coaching a bit more, while the youth side was good, it didn't offer the competitiveness that I was looking for. You got to remember, this is, late 90s, early 2000s.
Mm-hmm.
So the MLS was, just getting going. There was no academy system the way it is now. So again, it's a little different animal than it was. Nowadays is a little different than it was then. So also being able to make a full-time living out of this was a little bit difficult too, because kids weren't paying the amount, their parents weren't paying the amount that they're paying now on the youth game in America.
Yeah.
You didn't have these professional academies. So it was, you had to kind of do a few different things to make enough money to get by. And so for me, I kept my foot in the youth game and in the college game. My ambition was to get to the college level, and work as a head coach. And I was fortunate enough, and I was at University of Kentucky and University of Alabama, Birmingham. We were, top 20 in the country. We made, NCAA tournaments, I had good runs, and it was kind of like, hey, that's the direction I'm looking for. And then, I started looking at it a little bit more, and I'm saying, I'm not working with the players as much as I'd like because of how the NCAA was working. You're only working, you have the competitive season in the autumn, in the fall. And then in the springtime, you were playing, I think it was 5 matches, and you were also limited to the number of hours that you were able to work with players.
Yep.
And we had a lot of good players at those places, and they wanted to go pro. They wanted to, get to the next level. And I was kind of hindered by that as a coach, saying, you're coming to me saying, hey, Mike, can you help me work with this? And say, sorry, we've already hit your hours for the week.
Yeah.
You're kind of like, this is not right. And it was something like that. I thought, hey, I could do more. And going and visiting clubs in Europe and South America and seeing how things were done, it was kind of like, I have real interest in doing this. There was again, this is early on, I was speaking to, this is early 2000s. I was speaking to one MLS club and going there to be the assistant coach. And if you compared the money I was making between the club and the university, it was like a $30,000 pay cut. So, it was like, wow, okay, this might not be as professional as I thought it was. But again, this is early on, this is the early years. And, it was enlightening because, at the youth game, you had the stability, you're making, good money, you're making a good living, you were putting the hours in, but then I was also having the competitiveness of the college game. So, my next step was, hey, let's look at the pro game. And like I said, it just, after doing the stuff with Celtic, I just kind of said, hey, I want to go to Europe. This is what I want to do. And I kind of put my mindset on that. And for about a year, I kind of worked everything towards going that direction.
Mm-hmm.
And I really was following all the leagues. I was following players. I really kind of dove into that world as best I could. And that helped me to say, okay, this is right for me. This is what I want. And my big thing, and I talked about this with my family, my parents, was I didn't want to be the guy at the end of my life going, oh, I should have done this. I could have went there. I had the chance, but I didn't want to second guess myself. I would rather go over there and fail, but at least go over and do it, get the experience. Like if I went there and gave it a shot and it didn't work out, so be it. At least I did it. And that was one of the things that I'd rather go there and try to leave my mark. You go there and try to say, hey, let's do this, because I could have stayed in a real comfortable job, running a club, working at the university, which it was good. I was enjoying it. Like I said, there was nothing awful about it. There was, I don't want to say it that way, but I also had that desire inside of me to say, can I do it at that level as a coach? We used to joke around when I coached at University of Kentucky, is like, can you do today's training with Everton reserves? And that's how we used to joke around about it, because that's the age group that we were working with. Yeah. 18 to 23-year-olds. That would be, a reserve team in England. Can you do what you did with them, and would it be good training? And so that was our joke. Why Everton? Why not? We just picked that one out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And it was that kind of idea, was like, hey, can I go do this? And when I got over to Finland, it was like, okay, now's your time. Now you got to show. And it was the put up or shut up. And for me, the one thing I always looked at as being a foreigner working in the country was, am I doing the job better than a local person? Because if not, they shouldn't hire me. They should hire the local person, because it's Finnish football. So the idea was, if you're coming there, you have to offer something that's of difference, or of, I don't say more quality, but you have to offer something that is justification of why they're hiring a foreign coach.
Yep.
And I always tried to look at it that way, is say, you got to put in the work because, I don't say you're taking a job away for somebody. I don't mean it that way, but I mean it in the way that, you know, you have to bring something to the table.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you bring up a really important point that has been a huge motivating factor for me, in my life, in my career, and I think for anyone who's listening, right, that's a young player, young coach, you want to do something that's a little bit outside the box. I think that question of what if, it's a scary question, man. You don't want to get to a point one day where you look back and say, what if I had tried, or what if I had tried to go overseas? I think for me, right, I didn't go on to have this playing career that landed me in Europa League stadiums or playing the Bundesliga or anything like that. But I know that I won't have to look back and say what if, because I did go to Europe and I did, I saw it with my own two eyes and, played on pitches with guys. So I think that's such a huge thing, and regret is that other motivating factor that you don't want to have. And you and I bring up the quote that you mentioned a little bit earlier from that article where it said kind of those first few years I was scraping by to make a living, sacrificing a lot of time, energy, as you mentioned when you first got to Finland, 3, 4, 5 teams. That part where you give up that safe, kind of comfortable life and career working for a club to then go and chase the dream, so to speak, is really kind of what we try and talk about on this podcast. We've had a lot of players who share a similar story. Can you help provide a little bit more context to what does that look like? What is that grind or that scraping by to make a living? Are there any stories that you think of, or was it really just, training multiple teams always at all times?
No, I'll give you an example. Like in Finland, the seasons run usually January till October, November.
Mm-hmm.
So the heart of the season is in the summer months where the weather's warm and you're playing on grass. Well, in the January, February, March, well, depending upon the weather, maybe you have some training sessions indoor in a full-size indoor hall, or you're outside. So they scrape the snow off the pitch. They have some heat under it, and you go out and play.
Yeah.
So, to give you an idea, like I was working with, 4 or 5 teams. So on Saturdays, I was in what's called Palokenttä, which means like ball field, which is right behind the main stadium in Helsinki, like where HAK Helsinki and Heath play. But I was training back there, and there were 1-hour time slots on Saturday because it was the space is owned and run by the city. So each team would come out and you had to reserve it. So like I would do training with one group from 9 to 10, another one from 10 to 11. Then I'd have like a 2-hour break. And then another team that would come and I would train them from, whatever, 1 to 2. Well, during that, 2-hour break, I would walk over. There was a little Indian restaurant. I'd sit down there, get a cup of tea, wait, get warm, and go back and do the training. And this was a regular occurrence during those January, February, March. And, you got to remember in Finland, if you go, I'm talking about Celsius, anything colder than -10 Celsius, they usually stop training. Well, it may be -8 Celsius, but the wind is blowing. So it's a lot colder than that. But guess what? We got to train, because if not, we don't get our hour, training on that day. There's a couple other times during the week, but I used to have that on a Saturday training, 4 teams, 5 teams, and it's -8, -10 plus wind chill. And you got to go out there, you put in the session. Just because you're cold doesn't mean the players are. So again, you got to treat each session as its own entity. You got to come out here and be prepared. This is specific to this team. And for me as a coach, when we talk about learning your craft, each team's needs were different. So I would have to have a different training session for each group. You just don't come out and it wasn't assembly line. You just couldn't do the same training for the 17s, the 20s, the reserves, it just didn't work. You had to do stuff that was specific to them. So for me as a coach, during the week, I would plan, I got to do this with these guys. We've got training on, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday, or, and each one was on a different match calendar. The fixture list was different for each team. So it really, I had to put a lot of time and effort into it to make sure it was right for everybody. You just can't come out and just paint everybody with the same brush. It just didn't work. So besides the time training, you also have to, do the planning. You got to look at who's playing where. How do you adjust when you have different matches with different teams? So again, really being able to dive into that, for me, it was fantastic. At that time, to give you an idea, with the like Viking at first team, we would do some training in the morning, and then we'd do training in the afternoon. But during the middle of the day, I had a handful of hours that were free. So what I would do, and this is just was really great for me, is I'd take the metro or the tram into the city center and try to get lost.
Hmm.
And I'd spend a few hours walking around Helsinki trying to find my way back home just so I can learn the area. But during this time, I'd sit down, have a cup of tea, and plan my training session or revise my training session or do this. So while I was still enjoying the life, your mind's still on the game.
Yes.
You're still looking at it. You finish the matches on the weekend. Well, now you got to edit the video. You got to look and watch the matches. What do we need to do different? What do we have to do to prepare for the next match? And you're doing that for several teams, not just one team. So again, the hours, the effort, the time that you put in is not just on the training ground. That's I'd say the part I enjoy the most was being on the training ground and working with the players and on match day. But there's a whole lot of other activities that go into it in order to make match day successful. And so when you're doing that for several teams and you're trying to prove yourself, you have to put that little extra effort in. You got to do that. Is it easy to take time off? Yeah, it is. But if you take the time off, is that going to affect the team's performance? If it affects your performance, are you going to be able to get that next opportunity? And so that's the way I kind of looked at it in the beginning. Was I didn't mind sacrificing the time and energy, because I thought I didn't really look at it as sacrificing. I looked at it more as like investing in myself and investing in my future. And it's like anywhere, if you invest enough, eventually you'll be able to withdraw some of that credit, or that experience.
Yeah. Yeah, I heard something interesting. A player mentioned that you kind of do have to look at your career as a business, right? Like kind of as something that you, exactly as you just put, you have to invest the money, invest the time into kind of building your business, right? Your personal brand, so to speak, to the best that it can possibly be. Do you feel like when you got that opportunity to have your first time kind of working with a first team professional club, was that maybe one of the first big breaks kind of in your business, or your kind of brand of building yourself up as a coach?
Yeah, well, I think what really helped me, that really, I'd say, took me over the top, is, I don't know if that's the right expression, but that really was like boom moment. I was coaching the A junior, which was the U20 team, and we were
Mm-hmm.
playing in the match to go up. We either had to win or had to draw. And for the club, there was lots of, they'd never experienced that. They never had that before. So you had people were there watching. People had never seen the team play. Supporters would come and watch, and we scored early in the match. They equalized. We scored again. They equalized, and the last few minutes was really tense. And then you start making some tactical changes in a way to kind of negate what the opponent was doing, and we drew, which was enough points for us to go. And that was just like one of those moments, like, okay, like the relief I felt was like, wow. And I'm thinking, man, this is like a U20 match. Come on.
Yeah.
But the next day when I had first team training, I walked into the changing room and all the players applauded. All
Wow.
the staff, same guys that joking around 2 days ago, they didn't know anything about the U20s, but when they saw that we had success, it was like, okay, great. And that was one of the moments that was, for me, it was really good. And I remember that, and the celebration with the players in the changing room afterwards. I mean, it really was good, because once we did that, I got the opportunity to move to the first team full time the next year.
Mm.
And that next year was really good for me, because I was only focusing on that first team, and doing the training there with them. And at that time is where I got really confident, because I was doing the training. We had one player who played at the Crystal Palace. We had a couple guys that played in Germany, a guy who played in Eredivisie, who were all Finnish players who went abroad to play but ended up coming back. And we're working with these guys, and they're like, hey man, this is really good training. I like what you're doing. And that gave me the boost and gave me the confidence to say, okay, hey, you can work at this level. And that was like a really big thing for me. What also happened, which was really good, was the guy I was working with, Toke. He was working also for the FA, and he was instructing coaching courses. And for the first 2-3 years, I couldn't get into any UEFA courses.
Mm-hmm.
I was applying, I was trying to get in, and they kept saying no. Like, you don't speak the language. You various reasons I wasn't allowed in. So he was instructing a B course, and he's like, we were talking about it. I was like, man, it's so frustrating. I can't get in. He goes, what? I said, yeah, they're not letting me in. He goes, forget that. I'll put your name on a list. You're in. And it just worked out really well because I got in and did a fantastic job. I passed, was brilliant, but then I was in the system.
Yes.
So they couldn't now say, no, you can't, because I've already taken the course. And that was one of the moments that really also gave me the confidence, because at the B license, I had already done higher stuff in America, higher courses and higher training than what the B license was, which then said, yeah, man, you could do this. You can work here. And, like I said, that was like year 2 and 3. And that was really, really huge for me. And then after that year at Viking It, we had a fantastic year. I progressed and was offered a job at MIPA, which was in Vikosliga, which was the top level. And at that time that year, we were in UEFA Europa League qualifications. So it was really good, because now you're doing training with those guys and you're like, hey, this is Europa League. This is pretty good. And for me at that, once I kind of hit that, it was like, yeah, this is where I'm meant to be. This is what I'm meant to be doing, and just kept progressing. But like I said, it was those few moments, I think, early on, like I said, that U20s winning the league, that was one that kind of helped. And then that next year, when I was training the players and you're getting feedback from them saying, hey, this is really good, like I enjoy what you're doing. And it's not just like a guy who hasn't been around. There was guys that had played at good levels, and it's like, all right, hey, this means a lot to me.
Yes. And as we've gone along here, we've kind of mentioned some of the challenges, or maybe the barriers to entry in some of the roles that you've been able to find yourself in, and some of the success that you've been able to have has also come with adversity. What are some of the challenges? As you mentioned, kind of getting into a coaching course was a challenge. Just getting over to Europe to begin with, and then finding your first footing at a club was a challenge as well. What are some challenges that maybe you and I can kind of understand as people who have been and tried to make a career in football in Europe, that maybe somebody who hasn't, right, just an American coach, might not understand?
Well, in Finland, for example, it's people speak English, which is huge, but there's also people who don't.
Yes.
So, the language straight away, dealing with that, trying to navigate it, because it's not Latin based. It's its own entity. So there's a few borrowed words, but most are not.
What was your kind of experience with that? Working with staffs, working with players?
What I did immediately, and I've done this in every country that I've worked at where it's not English, I have a document that has all, words, turn, shoot, offside, so on and so forth, all the terms. And I said, hey, can you give me these? And we sat down and I got all of them, and then I practiced them, and just over and over, and got to the point where the football stuff was great. I was able to understand, like, once I grasped that part of the language, trying to use it in training and trying to do a little bit more each time, my language grew. I did that with English. I did it in Swedish. When I was in Slovakia, we did it with Slovak and Hungarian, because we had players from both there. When I worked with Fluminense and did that, I did stuff with Portuguese. So the idea is trying to do that in those different languages, so that I'm also, if you do have a player who's not comfortable using English as the coaching language, you can at least have a basic understanding. You can get the basic understanding across to them, or your point that you're looking to make. It may not be perfect grammar, but it was basic enough. And to me, that was one of the big things. And while I was at MIPA, they actually paid for me to have language lessons. And we did that. And then when I moved to another club called Ekenis, EIF, that's a Swedish speaking area of Finland. They paid for me to go to Swedish school. And so being able to do that, I was able to pick up the languages and spend more time learning that. And I think that's one of the biggest things when people look at going to other countries. not all countries work in English, so you have to also have a little flexibility, and you also have to understand it's not America. That you go to the market, the way they do stuff over there is different. The
Yeah,
products are
culture's so
different.
different.
You also, I did an interview one time. They said, what brought you over here? I said, I was looking for a challenge. It's like, have you found it? I said, man, I found it going to the supermarket. I can't read. I can't read. What do you have here? A number of times in the first few years that I bought the wrong thing because I thought this was milk, and it turned out to be like sour milk, or it turned
Yeah,
out to be like over there.
heavy cream or something.
Yeah, they've got also yogurt in the same kind of
Yep.
containers. And so it's like, you got to start to, okay, yogurty. Okay, that's yogurt. Okay, let me squeeze away from it. Mito is what I'm looking for. That's milk, and you start to look at those things. But learning that part of life is, while the game is what brought me there, the rest of life is what kept me there, and settling in, understanding the culture. Like, Finns are not known for being the most talkative, like they're kind of stoic and quiet. But when you get to know somebody and you have a relationship, you're great friends with them. You talk all the time. But just on the outside, it's not like in America. There's no small talk over there.
Yeah.
It's one of these things that, guys can be in a car and they drive for 6 hours and they say 7 words. Whereas here in America, you go from here down the street, you're talking the whole time, and understanding a little bit of the cultural differences is important, and when my Finnish wasn't good, but I would also try to speak it, and people would say, oh, okay, let's speak English now. But, like, they at least appreciated me trying. And that was also one of the things that also was encouraging, because people were really keen on helping me.
Yes.
And so for me, that was one of the things that, while there was some obstacles to get in, I also was able to develop a really good support network there, which also encouraged me to continue. And that was one of the things that I think really helped me in those beginning years. Was, there was people there that also wanted to see me successful. They appreciated I was coming over there. Like, to give you an idea, when I first got there, trying to get the work permit and trying to get the visa to live there, it took 14 months.
Yeah.
It's simple because they've had Americans come over to coach ice hockey. They had Americans come over and coach basketball, but they never had a football, soccer coach from America. So they didn't know how to process the visa. There was no grounds for it because they never had anybody do it. So I had to go through and submit all my documentations from USSF. I had to submit all my stuff from my education, my background, my playing background, like everything. And this went on for 14 months. So again, it's one of those things that I was fortunate enough that it worked out. But if I didn't have the right documents or whatever, it could have easily been like, hey, see you later. So that was one of the things when I tell people, hey, what can I do to get over there? Well, you also have to have some prerequisite. You just can't go over there and say, hey, I'm here to coach. Well, you could be a great coach, but again, like what happened in Scotland, you have to have certain qualifications to get there. And that what I would say to anybody that's interested in going over there, learn about the culture. Like, before I went to Finland, I met with one Finnish lady once a week for almost 6-8 months to try to learn some basic language. Not even really good, but just she was Finnish, and she was trying to help me with it, and I learned a few basic things. When I was there, I threw myself into learning the language. Culturally, you learn how people tick, what's the society, what's the society norms. I say this, and people in America don't believe me, but the way it works in Finland is, say you're walking out and it's 2:00 in the morning and you come to the crosswalk and the light's blinking red.
They don't go.
People stand.
Yeah.
They wait until it turns green and then they walk across, and you're like, wow, all right. But culturally, the society, there's a big respect factor. They people don't throw trash on the ground. People, you keep everything clean. It's this part of the culture that I really enjoyed, and the respect that people show to each other. And that's something to me that, I really bought into, and I got to see that, and I got to experience it, and it made me want to be there longer. And when I did have obstacles in the way, I weren't seen as obstacles. They were just something I had to deal with and move on.
Yes.
It wasn't something that was stopping me. It was just something like, okay, hey, we got to do this and move on. And that was one of the things that, with the support network, with the people, with the clubs, I was really fortunate. And I think that also paid off because I put a shift in, on the field, I was doing the work. Off the field, I was, I'd go study, language classes, free language classes from the government. I went. Why? Because I wanted to learn it and get better. When people started to see that and hear that, I think they respected it. And that's what I said, in the one article. I said, if you go there and you show that you're working hard at it and you're doing what's needed, people respect that. And for me, it was very fortunate. And that's why I said those early years, I put as much hours in as I could.
Was there an element of kind of your American culture that you tried to bring over as well and instill into the teams that you were working with in Finland, right? Because I know you mentioned you're trying to assimilate and kind of understand their culture and understand their societal norms, but I have to imagine too you also kind of want to come in and, as we mentioned before, bring in your own unique voice and your own unique stamp to the game, to training ground, right? So was there an element of that you were kind of conscious about?
Yeah, I think, one of the things that we have here in America is, sports is super competitive. Even at the youngest ages, it's you're out there to win. You're out there to battle and fight and find a way to win. And I think one of the things that's really big here in America is also the spirit. When you create a good spirit inside the changing room, or the I don't say the psychological side of it, but I think this is really good in American culture. And being able to bring that there added something a little bit different. And that was one of the ones that I really enjoyed, being able to bring that part of the game. And it's not just football, soccer, but it's here. The idea of being able to bring in that competitiveness, bring in that little stronger mentality, in the sport arena. That's something that I think was a little different because our take on sports is different than some other countries and cultures, and sometimes, at the youth or the younger levels, it's a hobby. Well, over there, for some, it was a hobby, but for some, it's going to be their career. So being able to say, hey, these are the things you need to do if you want to be successful, and try to get people to buy into it and come on board. I think it's also helps when you're a foreign coach coming over saying, hey, if you want a chance to go play at a higher level, outside of this country, these are the things that you need to do. Maybe it carried a little bit more weight because I was a foreign coach. Is it anything different than what a Finnish coach would say? No, not at all. But it just has a different voice. And, being able to bring some of that in was, I think, helpful for a lot of players. But all in all, like I said, the sports culture in America, I don't think there's much like it in the world. And so being able to bring some of that over, I thought was good for the players.
So as you experienced the culture in America, you then experienced the culture of football in Finland. Can you compare and contrast then when you had this opportunity to go to Slovakia, and also I know as well you had national team experience with Papua New Guinea as well, and did some other things. Can you kind of maybe compare and contrast what were some things that you saw differently in football culture and maybe just culture in general?
Yeah, well, it's different. If you talk a little bit about the difference between when I was in Shamarin in Slovakia, this is kind of a longer story, but when I was at MIPA in Finland, we had a partnership with Fluminense from Brazil, and we had players on loan, and we were like a partner club. Well, down the road, 2 years later, Shamarin was bought. I think 75% of the club was bought by Fluminense, and they asked me to come be the coach there. So for me, it was really good because I had the relationship with the club, but they also put 9 players from Brazil there. So it was being able to bring together the history and culture of the club like Fluminense with the history and culture of Shamarin. And the issue with Eshtika Shamarin is they're in a Hungarian speaking area of Slovakia. So you had players that were, Slovakia, people with a Hungarian background, and now you throw in 9, or technically it was 8 Brazilians and 1 Argentinian, and then an American coach. So there was a little bit different because it was more about bringing everybody together and creating a common language, creating a common experience. Whereas in Finland, the Finns were also very receptive straight away because, you know, a lot of them follow like the NHL, they follow American football, they follow, some of the sports, so they're aware of the sporting culture and the competitiveness in America. Whereas in Slovakia, it was a little bit different because they're coming out of like Eastern European mentality. It's like, hey, you know, you're the coach, you tell us what to do. Whereas in Finland, you would do a lot of asking questions. So you have this option. What else do you see? And I see pass here or pass here, pass here. So the players be a good exchange. And Slovakia was a little bit different because they don't do it like that. You're the coach, you tell them, you do this. And it was kind of like you direct them straight forward. And I said, that's not how I want to work. I want you guys to, learn. I just don't want you to do it because I say to do it. I want you to learn it so that it becomes second nature to you. And for many of the players, this was something new and something different. And it worked really well for us. I mean, we got promotion. The team was really successful. And it was a good way to bring all the cultures together. I think that's one of those things that when you learn about being in different places, you also have to, the biggest thing I learned about this is respect everybody as an individual, and regardless of where it was in the world, get to know people one-on-one, sit down, talk to them, find out what makes them tick, to use the catchphrase, what is their why? Why are they doing this? Why are they playing? What makes them get out of bed every day to choose this as their career? And so being able to build up a relationship with the players that way was really good. And I was able to do that with my staff and the people around the club, especially in Slovakia, was really good. When I went to Papua New Guinea, is a whole different situation. One of my former players at University of Kentucky, his name is Giovanni Fernandez. He was working for Oceania Football Confederation, and he was also working with the Asia Pacific Football Academy. And so he told me about this opportunity there. I had a bust up with the general manager of the club I was with, was Finland, and it just it was March. You're in the middle of preseason, and we agreed to terminate the contract. Wow. So here I am in the middle of the, still in the preseason. There's no jobs available in Finland. What am I going to do? I'd been there a handful of years, and it worked out really well that he said, hey, there's an opportunity here with OFC. And I went to OFC. And then after a little bit, I went to Papua New Guinea. And there was a whole different thing because you're dealing with a developing nation, the everything that goes along with that. We had players that I don't want to say couldn't read or write, but they had a very minimum education. So being able to put together a training manual this thick about, how we want to play, it didn't work. You had to actually be on the field and show them. You had to paint the picture. You had to give them the visual. You had to have the videos, because some of the guys, if I gave them a book, it's going to stay at the corner of the table until I pick the book back up. They're not opening it, so culturally there, you had to understand, you're dealing with a different type of player, a different kind of background, a different financial situation. Like, there's people that I was working with there that were still living at the way they would 100 years ago in the big open house that sleeps everybody, sleeping on the ground. There's many of them didn't have electric in the house, so when they came and were living at the full-time academy at the, in the residence there, they loved it. It was a huge step up for them. So for them, they actually put in a lot of extra work, because now this was their path to get out of the poverty, to get out of this type of life. So those were guys that also really wanted to work and put in the effort. So you also had to match that energy. You had to bring that, with them. So again, culturally, you have to get to know the player. You have to get to speak to them. What's their background? What are they looking to do? Where are they looking to go? How can I help them? And again, each place is a little bit different because culturally it's different. But I think the players respect you when you respect them as a person.
And this may speak to a little bit more of just the culture of football as a whole right now, and kind of the way the landscape works with managers. But you've had so much experience in your career in, different countries, but also with so many different clubs, right? There's been a number of clubs in Finland. Then obviously we've just talked about Slovakia and the national team experience as well. And, can you speak to it all, maybe the way in which a coach's career kind of works, where, it's very rare for a coach or a manager to stay at one club for, an extended period of time, 10, 12, 15 years, something like that. It's definitely unique to kind of this profession, this world of sports, where you have these little short stints. And obviously each situation is different, and you don't necessarily have to kind of dive into each one, but can you maybe speak to that kind of notion at all, and how maybe you navigate it as a coach, even someone right now where you're kind of looking for, okay, where am I headed to next?
Yeah. Well, I think, you got to look at it as this is your career. So you always have to look at, what's best for you. That's, in the back, but you also, wherever you're at, you got to do the best job that you possibly can. And the way I always looked at it is, can I leave the club in a better position than when I got there? Now that could be in the table, with results. It could be in structure. It could be in methodology. It can be, various ways, player development. You're developing players that you're able to sell. There's different ways to judge that. But for me, that's the way I always looked at it, can I help this club progress? If I'm going to be here indefinitely, what is the next project I want to accomplish? And that's the way I always look at, even if I had a 1-year contract or a 2-year contract, whatever it may be, I always got to look at what I think would be the best in the long term. You want to build something that's going to be there even after you're gone. And so being able to do that on a regular basis, I think when you have success like that, other clubs look for that. They look to bring you in. Career-wise, you also have to look at the business side of it. Financially, is there better opportunities out there? One of the things that led to me also sometimes, only taking 1 and 2 year contracts was also club finances. Is a club ready and willing to sign a coach for, 3+ years? Some do, some don't. When you operate there in a lot of the smaller leagues, it's like 1 year plus option for 1, 2 years with option plus 1. So you got to look at those sort of things. And so when you do get a better opportunity somewhere else, you have to really gauge, hey, is this the right move? It might be better money financially, but is it better move in the background? What if you don't have the financial support to get the players you want? What happens if you don't have a strong owner or a good board? So you have to really look at those sort of things. Like for me, almost every job I've taken has been geared with me on my own. I didn't have an agent. Only recently did I signed with a company called Arc Sports, and Stuart McGregor, really, really good guy. He's in Scotland. But up until 18 months ago, I'd been doing everything on my own. And so what's the way you can get hired? By having good results at the clubs that you're at. And so that was the big thing for me, was always trying to make sure I can showcase my ability, but also I can help build the club in the direction that they want to go. And so, when you look at this sort of stuff, sometimes guys jump at a job, but they take the job without knowing what might be the downside. So for me, I always try to do my due diligence. While there's been a handful of job offers I've been given, sometimes you got to turn them down because it's not the right move for you at the right time. And that's one of the big things I look at a lot, is to say, what can I bring to the club, but also what can the club do for me, in that next step? Where do you want to progress to? In the back of your head, I think you always have an end goal, where you want to end up at, and how do you build towards that? And I think that's the big thing for all coaches is, I always, in the back of I'm an Arsenal supporter, and I say, hey, I want to manage Arsenal one day. Like that's, will it happen? I don't know, but you know what? That's what I have in the back of my head. If one day they come knocking, guess what? I'm going.
Yeah.
But to me, years ago, that was always the joke is, hey, this is where I want to go. And the more you get around it, the more you do it, the more you say, hey, you're on that cusp of breaking through. I mean, I've been with clubs that we've on, I think 3 or 4 different occasions, we've been in Europa League qualifying. We played, Copenhagen in Copenhagen, Dynamo Minsk, like bounced around. A few years back, we lost in the final, the third round of qualifying. Had we gotten the result on the day, the team that beat us drew Man City in that fourth play-in round.
Wow.
You're that close to that next step. That's what also keeps me going is, that you're right in that mix, one or two results one way or the other, all of a sudden all eyes are on you, so it's one of those things that, career wise, you got to have a plan in the background, but you also got to be prepared. Something good might happen. Like I said, I would have never thought I'd work in Slovakia. Well, we did well with the players that we had from Fluminense at MIPA, and they said, "Hey, we want you." It worked out great. The sports director went there. I'd worked with him, and he said, "Come on, let's go." Same thing by going to Oceania Football Confederation in Papua New Guinea. I never envisioned having to bust up with the general manager of the club, but we did, and we both lost our tempers, and things were said, and next thing you know, I'm out of a job. So, okay, what do? I reached into my network and I was able to get a job, but turned out to be on the whole other side of the globe.
Yeah.
You got to be flexible. I never would have thought I would have done that, but it happened. So you got to roll with the punches. You can have like a structure or an outline of what you want to do, but you also have to have the flexibility to change, and just roll with the punches, I guess, is the phrase that you might use.
Yeah.
Did I learn from all of those? Yeah, very much so. And going to OFC and Papua New Guinea, I got to do, instruct FIFA courses. I got to work on curriculum. I coached the national team. I was a mentor for all the national teams. I was technical director of the country. I never would have thought I would have done that, but I got the experience, going and working at FIFA education seminars, in different parts of the world. That was fantastic, and had I not gotten an argument with the GM, that would have never happened, but it did. So learn from it, move on. And I think that's why sometimes people are so rigid. I talk to players sometimes about going to Scandinavia, and no, I only want to go to England or Germany or Italy. Good luck, pal. Go to somewhere else, show what you can do, and then move up. It's not the only way, but I think it's a good way. You need a stage to play on. Here's a place that's looking for players. Go there. You go and have a good year. Guess what? Somebody's going to snatch you up. And I look at the same in coaching. You go and do well. Somebody's looking. People are always looking at the results. People are looking at what you're doing and how you're doing it. Are you developing players? Are you winning matches? Are you selling players for money? This is a business.
Absolutely.
People are not doing this to lose money.
Yeah. Yeah, as we sort of kind of bring this all to a culmination, I know a lot of players listen to this, and as someone who you've just mentioned, you've had years of experience developing players, coaching, working with players, mentoring players at the highest level. What, to those young players that are listening out there, can you help kind of guide them or show them what does it take really to be a pro on and off the field? What does it look like to be a European pro, right? For maybe American players who are looking to one day make that jump. Can you just kind of dive into that a little bit for a player that might be listening?
Well, I think there's a few things with this. And if I just compare, let's say, under 17 players, you're at this age. If I go back to my time at Coops and Kuopio Palo Serra, we compare like our A juniors, so you're 17, 18-year-olds. Many of these guys were going to the sports high school. So 3 times a week in the morning, they had the school training.
Mm-hmm.
Then they would come to first team training, which was 4 times a week. Then in the evening or afternoon, they would do their physical training 2 or 3 times a week. And then if they weren't selected with the first team, they would go to the reserve team training, which was a few times in the week. So again, we balanced to make sure the load wasn't, too much. But if you look at each of those being either an hour and a half or, hour 15-minute training time, and you compare that with some of the clubs here in America, the same age, where you're training Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and you're playing 1 or 2 matches on the weekend. Well, if you look at the training to match ratio in Europe versus the training to match ratio over here, it's not the same. I think you get more training to matches versus over here. You might get more matches to training. I know with the new academy set up and the clubs, it's gotten much better. Mm-hmm. So, that the ability to train and learn your craft as a player, you have to invest on the training ground. What do I mean by that? Well, speed of play, technical ability. One of the terms I use all the time is technique on demand. Can you deliver the ball where you want, when you want, with pressure, without pressure, in the wind, on the rain? Can you do that all the time? Are you good enough on the ball to be able to have that, also the ability to improvise, but still have the technique to deliver it? And can you do it more than once? If you do it once, it's luck. You do it twice, it's chance. You do it 3 or more times, it's skill. And being able to have players to be able to do that under those conditions against good players. That's the thing I tell people: spend a lot of time with the ball. Become a student of the game. Watch matches. Look what, if you're in midfield, can you replicate what, some of the top midfielders in the world are doing? Bring that stuff to your game. You have to look at it as, this is your career. This is your job. What are you doing to separate yourself from the next guy? And I look at this. I was at Mipo, which was a small town called Milikoski on kind of the east side of Finland. And I think, they said there was like 6,000 people there. I think maybe it might have been 3.5 in the town, but I had a Premier League team, a Veikkausliiga team. Well, for the players, there wasn't much going on. So what a lot of those guys would do is they go out and train. You'd have team training, then they would go out to individual sessions. They were investing in themselves. They got, guys got good at free kicks. Center backs got good at opening the game with right foot, with left foot. And the players invested in themselves to get better. Besides the on the field, the next part I say is the off the field. Are you taking care of yourself? Are you sleeping right? Are you eating right? Are you living the lifestyle to be a professional athlete? Again, it's not just showing up at training. Are you getting the right diet? Are you studying the videos the coaches are putting out? Are you looking at the next opponents? Are you skipping the party Friday night so that you can get some sleep? Those are the things that you have to really look at and say, this is my career. This is the stuff I have to do. And I think for a lot of young players, sometimes they get caught up with, hey, I'm not training with the first team. I don't have to work so hard. I've made it. No, you just got your foot here to training. Now you got to do well, and then you got to move up. You got to build that up. And I think sometimes people think it's going to be, I show up and it's going to happen automatically. Now, the number of times you get emails, text messages, WhatsApp messages from players all over the world just wanting the opportunity. You've got to have something that's going to separate you from all the rest. And if you have that, teams will take a look at you. So look to develop that in your game, whatever it may be. If you're a center back, you're great at winning balls in the air. You're good at opening the game. If you're a number 10, are you creative? Are you able to play in some good balls? Can you read the game? Can you create opportunities? You have to develop something in your own game that's going to separate you from everybody else. And I think that's one of the things here in America that sometimes gets lost, because here a lot of players play in their own age group. They don't play against men. To give you an idea, when I coached at Coops, I think we had our reserve team, which is called Kufu, which is now called Coops Academy. But I think 15 players that were a junior or younger got first team appearances or debuts. And I think a total of 22 players that were youth players got either first team experience or at least reserve team experience that were still young. We had guys as young as 15 playing in men's, second division.
Yeah.
So you're 15, 16 playing against grown men. So that's the environment that they're coming from. They're in and around that environment. They're in and around that competition. They're not playing against the best guy in the state that's the same age. They're competing against men. And I think that's one of the things that people have to also grasp is, if you're good enough, you're old enough. And that's one of the old sayings that was taught to me years ago. If you're good enough, you're old enough. As long as you're not going to get hurt physically, if you're good enough, put them in that environment. Let them fail. Let them learn from it and grow and develop. It does no good going out beating a team 7-0 week after week after week and great, hey, I'm a state champion. Well, how about if I move you up one age group? Well, now all of a sudden you struggle.
Yeah.
Put those players in that environment. Get that experience. Play against men. Play against better players. And I think that'll help players grow. That will help you develop those skills that we're talking about that are going to separate you from somebody else. Because in the grand scheme of things, you're not competing with the guy from the town over. you're competing with everybody else in the world that's eligible, which could be from 16 to 36, and that market of player, there's a lot of good players out there. Everybody's, hungry for that opportunity. So you have to do something that's going to help you separate yourself. And the last part I'll add to this, and I think this is the biggest one, and there was a study done in the Netherlands with the players coming out of the academies over there, that the number one quality that the players had was mentality. When somebody said, you're not good enough, they said, yes, I am. I'll just find somebody else who thinks I am. They were able to deal with the adversity of being cut, because it's very rare that you're going to go through all the way through at one club with one organization. People are going to turn you away. They're going to say, hey, you're not good enough, but you have the self-belief to continue and go on. You look at like somebody like Jamie Vardy, look what happened to him. Look at how those guys, didn't get the opportunities when they were, coming through, but look what the career he's had. He had the self-belief and the drive and the determination to stay through it. And I think this is one of the things that players have to understand is, just because you try once and it doesn't work, you can't just stop. You got to fight through it. There's going to be adversity. There's going to be people out there that say, hey, you're good enough, but you don't have the passport. Hey, you're good enough, but we just signed somebody 2 weeks ago. This is the nature of the business.
Yes.
Do you have the internal fortitude to say, okay, great, no problem. I got to find another club. I got to find another opportunity, and the drive to do it. You're going to be told no many, many, many times.
Way more times than you hear yes.
But when you get that yes, then you got to grab a hold of it.
Yeah.
You got to have the belief and the confidence to say, okay, now's my chance. Let me show what I can do. And I think sometimes guys aren't ready and willing to always put in that work and put in that effort. It's tough. You're going to be told no. You're going to be told this isn't going to work. Do you have that belief in yourself to be able to say, yeah, here I go. I believe in what I'm going to do, and I believe in myself. And if you don't believe it, no problem. I'm going to find the next guy who will. And I think that's one of the big steps that it takes from players from America to get abroad, is to understand it's not just going to happen. It's not just like snapping your fingers. It's, you got to work, you got to graft, and when you get there, you got to perform.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think psychologically, the mentality of a player is really what's going to determine whether or not they have that success, or they reach whatever it is their goal is or not, right? I mean, I talk to so many players in this format and just in general, and the number, and that's why I think it's important to reiterate this fact that what you're saying, you're going to hear no a lot, right? You hear a lot of people say that, but we don't just say it as kind of like a cliche saying it. It's very true, because the number of players I've spoken to that they're like, yeah, it took me 8, 9, 10, 11 trials just for me to sign that first pro contract. And that's not even including all of the contacts that you reach out to, all the phone calls, all the emails, everything else to try and even set up those few windows of opportunity to trial, and then actually find the one where it's all going to click and then you're going to get the opportunity. So I don't want to necessarily say that it's delusion. I don't think that's the right word, but in a way, the more that you hear no, you almost have to be a little bit delusional to be like, no, actually I still believe in it. It's still yes. Like, I just need to find someone else who's going to have that shared same opinion as me. So yeah, I completely agree, and it's
that's the part with this is it's subjective.
Yes.
You look around, one coach likes one type of player, exact same player goes somewhere else, another coach hates them. So you also, I would say this to players: do some research on where you're going. If you don't have the technical ability to play a really tight possession type game, don't look at clubs like that.
Yeah, don't go to Spain.
You look at other areas that might fit your game. And I think putting in that other work also helps you determine your path a little bit, or I say the path of least resistance, but less resistance. You know what I mean? And I think being able to do some of that research and invest in yourself and invest in your career could open up some opportunities along with that self-belief. Just don't write 1,000 clubs, dear coach, I want to come play there. That's not going to work. You have to have some specifics for them. And we talk about this. My middle nephew, he's got the dream of being a professional player. And I try to help him and say, hey, if you're going to do this, you have to stand up for yourself. Nobody's going to guard your career the way you are. So, when you start looking at clubs, write specifically, hey, I'm a number 9 that likes to play with my back to goal. That's good in the box. So find teams that play that way. Do some research. Just don't send it to everybody, because they're going to watch your video and say you don't fit here. So, but if there's a club that plays that way, send your video to them. They say no, okay, great. A few weeks later, send it again. Hey, coach, I saw struggled in the match, but here's me playing in that same position, and it's knocking on the door. You keep knocking until somebody answers.
Yes, 100%. And I think even if, for those who might still be kind of questioning what we're speaking about, you can even look at some of the players that are at the pinnacle of the game right now, right? Like Kevin De Bruyne, when he was at Chelsea, you would have thought, no way that he now has the career and the experience that he's having right now, the form that he's in. Arguably, one of the best players in the world right now. Same thing with Mo Salah. It took a long time for Mo Salah to kind of all of a sudden be this overnight success, right? So, yes, we can speak of it in the context of just trying to break into the professional game, but it also applies to players that are trying to stay at the professional level, players that are trying to get to the peak of the professional level. It's going to be a lot of no's. It's going to be a lot of, no, this isn't the right fit, for you to then find where the right fit is and for you to be able to excel. So,
yeah, I agree.
Man, I could talk about your story and share stories all day, but I don't wanna keep you forever. So, Mike, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon, for sharing your story, for giving some advice to players and coaches out there. I greatly appreciate it.
No, thank you so much, and it's been a pleasure. And anytime that you fancy me back on, please, I'd love to jump on. It's always great to chat with somebody that has the same passion and shares the views about the game. So thank you so much, and I appreciate it.
Yes, I would definitely love that, to be back one day. So yeah, thanks to all those that are listening. That was the episode for this week, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much to Mike once again for stepping in and sharing so much of his story. I think that was a really awesome episode for you guys. Thank you to all of you out there listening. I greatly appreciate it. And if you've made it this far, I hope that you're a true fan of the show and you like what we do. So please tell someone that you know who you think it might be a good fit for. Share it on your social medias. Helps the podcast grow. I would greatly appreciate it. We got some great guests lined up, some exciting episodes coming up in the future, so make sure that you stay tuned for that. And I will catch all of you on the next one. Peace.